This is Dara Mendez, Interim Director for the Center for Health Equity at the University of Pittsburgh, and welcome to the first annual Poetic Health Justice Forum. We have a lineup that will really spark inspiration, gratitude, conversation, and community. Tonight, we end Minority Health Month, where we center the experiences and health of Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and people of color. The Poetic Health Justice Forum was created to curate a space where people in public health, scholars, artists, writers, and creatives are in conversation about issues of equity, justice, and health. Over the past year, we have had experienced a pandemic, global movement for Black lives, reckoning and redress of state-sanctioned violence against Black people, and as artists, many who are here today, in this case, poets and writers, who inspire us to envision a future, to think beyond our boundaries, to be in concert and community across our areas and disciplines. So tonight, I'm joined by my partner and brilliant writer, Dr. Jason Mendez, who will kick us off this evening.
Cool, thank you. Dr. Jason Mendez, I'm the co-founder of Black Chronicles, which is one of the co-sponsors of tonight's event. Black Chronicles is a national web series and online magazine profiling the work of Latinx and other Black, Indigenous, people of color educators, artists, researchers, and community organizations in the areas of Latinx studies, education, health equity, arts, and culture. Before we begin, I actually wanted to just read a little excerpt from a memoir that I'm actually reading right now. In the beginning of Kazim Ali's memoir, Northern Light, Power, Land, and the Memory of Water, he writes about the colonization of Indigenous land by the Canadian government. In telling this history, he shares about the residential school system and the impact colonization has on the mental health and well-being on young people. He writes, "It feels obvious to say that the residential school system that existed in Canada, like the system of Indian boarding schools in the United States, existed so that young people taken from their families would be raised apart from their traditional lands in effort to break cultural, linguistic, and political bonds between Indigenous peoples and their communities. The social problems exacerbated by these generations of family separation, substance abuse, interfamily violence, and the loss of language and cultural heritage continue to this day. Within a similar context of Ali's work, tonight's artists are not just sharing their work, but sharing the socio-cultural histories and legacies of the families and communities they belong and the places that shape their lived experiences. And now I'm excited to introduce our first artist and MC for this evening, Joseph Capehart. Joseph Capehart is a nationally acclaimed poet, speaker, host, educator, and community organizer. Liberian by way of Minneapolis, Minnesota, they hold an MFA in poetry from Randolph College, which myself and Mateo are alumni of. So big up Randolph College. Joseph's work appears in multiple print publications, and their poetry videos have been featured across the internet with Button Poetry and MTV, among others. They currently live in Brooklyn, New York, where they serve as a 7th grade reading teacher. Thank you, Joseph, for hosting this evening, and now I'll turn it over to Joseph.
Thank you so much, Dara and Jason. This is amazing. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this whole forum that we're doing together. It's so incredible to see people gathering around art, specifically the art of poetry. As was mentioned, like poets, our job is to not only describe the world around us, but conjure the worlds that we need. And so I'm super excited, and I hope that y'all are excited as well to get to conjure, to really see the worlds that we're imagining, the worlds that are being created and built in this small space, and is being built in our greater bodies of work as well. All right, so I'm gonna share some poems that I've written myself, and then we're gonna run through just this incredible lineup. So I hope that you all stick with us. Please keep your hearts and your ears open. Get those pens ready to write down just these fire lines. Throw your support into the chat as well, because I know we all like to see a little bit of encouragement coming through us, since we can't be right up on each other right now in each other's space. So go ahead and do what you can in the chat. Send, if you feel a line, if you feel something that actually moves you, let it move you. You know, it's like we kind of, this is low-key a little bit academic or whatever, but you don't have to sit staunch and still, you know, let that spirit move you as it does, okay? So the first poem I'm going to start off with is one that's really near and dear to my heart, as somebody who's grown up in many different places, and it has spent a lot of time trying to place myself, place my childhood, trying to really understand how nostalgia can hold me in times of grief, can fuel me in times of joy. Not all my boys have fathers, but we all had them hands. We learned how to loot respect from busted jawbones and shattered ankles. We chiseled our name into every pickup game, looking for a hope we couldn't find in the mouths of white men, made immortal in white pages, looking for trouble, you might say. And trouble is an octave only heard in the short breaths between our laughter, the kind that worried older folks. We were miracles, disappearing acts in broad daylight. Too much fire for such small bodies of water, brown-eyed dares pounding against the asphalt. A Nike ad in which a Black boy scales a telephone pole. He's old enough to understand the importance of running. He's young enough not to know who to be running from. Home sat in our mouths like a song that we hadn't gotten tired of yet, that we hadn't yet learned to trade for respect. Jaquan tells us that the girls are becoming women, and I am looking at his mouth. That year, I learned not to love anything that looks like me. That year, we watched Phil's cousin get shot outside his house for false claiming. Our parents tell us to get inside and call the police. That same year, we watched someone's dad smash. We watched somebody's dad get his face smashed into the sidewalk by two cops, and we do not know who to call. And that was our superpower. Learning far too much, far too quickly, but still managing to be wet giggles on a summer night. Give us corners, and we would build you kingdoms. Give us parking lots, and we'd build you football stadiums. Give us nothing, and we'd still come home covered in dirt and magic. And you can ask our mamas about the dirt. They'll tell you how we came home 2 shades darker, looking more like God than we would ever know. Born waist deep in quicksand, told to pull ourselves out of it without shedding any blood. They say, what about the good ones? What about those nice Black kids that make it out of the hood and make something of themselves, as if we were not becoming before they suggested it? As if we were not already good, as if our excellence could be confined by their American dream. And our dreams, we were happy and free, and there was no reason to run anymore. In our dreams, we were astronauts and pirates and presidents and dragons. We were children sitting on someone's auntie's porch, our hearts pounding against the asphalt, our hands stretch to an orange sun, and the brilliance of it, cradling our skin and promising us tomorrow. Thank you. The next piece that I'm going to share is in connection, right? It's like in growing up, you learn a lot about how to love. You learn a lot about how to grieve, how you're supposed to hold those things specifically. And sometimes the teachers that we have for those are not so great. Being young and Black and queer, there wasn't always a blueprint about how I was supposed to live my life and what that was supposed to look like. So you kind of have to take things where you can. You have to learn these lessons where you can. And one of the greatest lessons I've learned about love came from a really unsuspecting place for me. I keep my eyes open when my father prays. He begins the same way every time. Our Father, the hard line horizon of his lips parting to reveal the pinkest part of him. Tongue lifting and lulling at the whim of the Spirit, hallowed be the names of all his children. How we crowd his mouth when he prays. His voice, a low tide, an ocean I can wade. He speaks so sweet to his God. Your will be done. Bent and bowed, his faith makes him seem older somehow, shrunk human and hoping for heaven. Years of worry tugging at the folds in his face. Forgive me this small trespass. Knelt beside a man I do not recognize. A man's whose hands surely have never fallen heavy against my mother, whose hands could tend to nothing but their own braided disciplines. I learned to love by watching my father surrender himself to the air. I study the measures of tenderness with which he handles his eternity, how he breaks only to breathe and listen for his beloved. I come from an expanding list of patriots, sons of sidewalk funerals, open caskets blooming with resemblance to the sky's good blue. Born in the wake of each going, born in the wake of each going is a throttle begging the earth to give the boy back a mother, becoming the mother of her own breath and nothing else. There's far too much hope in this blood, too much fight in these bones that forgive their way into another morning. It's hard to truly want a country until one has been taken from. And every incarnation of the night, an officer is afraid and leaves behind a smoldering mess you could mistake for someone's child. You don't love this land until you've prayed it love you back, until it don't love you back, until it love you black enough to blind itself to the soil, shaking from your braids. And just like that, the boy's gone. This forgetful country will chew on another body until it is memory, and I will go to work tomorrow with a new name boiling at the back of my throat, yet I will not burn everyone that I speak to. I will say Freddie Gray and not shatter your spinal cord. I'll say Sandra and not hang you from the ceiling. I'll say Philando and not leave your daughter to suffer your absence. America, every day that you survive, my cousin, is another day my auntie chose to pray instead of set you ablaze. The days that my sisters are more grief than girls, pray they break only the parts of you that must be broken. Pray there's room for you in this new world, and trust it will be built of all the bullets that have missed our bodies and consecrated by all the ones that didn't. When I say I love this country, I mean I pledge allegiance to the sweat it took my mother to get here. I mean, what else can a seed do but wear the cold, wet dirt into a glittering gown and dance towards the sun? And the last poem I'm going to share with you all, it continues to be a lot. It continues to be a lot to have access to the death of your people on replay, to be able to see that. And it really questions just like what becomes of the people who know grief so readily, who have grief so present to them. And when we have to bear witness to something like that, how important does it become to bear witness to life? How important does it become to bear witness to joy in Black life? And this last poem, after Roger Reeves, really allowed me to step into that position of witnessing the good, witnessing what is, what lives. That makes me want to do a whole different poem, but we're gonna stick on it. Everybody knew the dog was gonna survive, except the dog. A few sorry strays snatched up by the tide, and now it's clear what any animal will do to keep its head above water. Everybody knew the dog was gonna survive until it didn't. We watched it box the waves a few rounds before leaving us all wet-toed with regret as the water did what we forgot it does and pulled the mud down. And when days later it resurfaced, fur darkened by the deep, eyes open and waterlogged, it watched a man wade waist deep into the Pacific with a Black boy cradled in his arms. And perhaps if it would have said, wait, 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 as the man lowered the boy's head towards the water. Something imperceptible on the man's lips, conjuring something like a yes from the boy's body. Together they float, both the living and the dead. The water's frantic attempts at their necks, leaving their black glistening in the moonlight. Over the sound of the waves, the stray listens to the man's laughter as the boy mimics his clean strokes with childish vigor. The night goes on, and still the dead dog's eyes are open. Two stubborn moons refusing to set on the boy now splashing in the ocean. As though to say, if death require a witness, so too does life. Soon they part, the man and the boy reaching and gliding back through the water, the stray carried by the waves to the shoreline, to be found gleaming, entangled in seaweed. Thank you all so much for allowing me to share my poems with you all. That transference of energy right there was hopefully a blessing for you as much as it was for me, because truthfully, I feel full. I feel full even now as I've read those. So now we're going to continue this train of just fantastic poets. We're going to start off with coming from the first cohort of Randort College. Randort, look at it. Don't even know my college's name. What I paid them for? What did I pay them for? Can't even say the name. Randolph College and the MFA. Mateo Perez Lara is a queer, non-binary Latinx poet from California. They received their MFA in poetry as part of the first cohort to graduate from Randolph College's creative writing program, Gang Gang. They have a chapbook, Glitter Gods, published with 30 West Publishing House. As a queer Latinx person, they hope to elevate not only their voice, but the voice and voices of the communities in which they are from and hold solidarity for. And without further ado, Mateo, take the floor.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you if you're watching, and thank you, Dara and Jason, Dr. Dara and Jason, for having me here and for allowing me to be a part of this discussion. I'm going to read a few poems. Before I read the poems, though, I really was excited to be a part of this forum, because health is very important, especially mental health, especially for the LGBTQ community, because there's really a lot of not great or outlets to find mental health, especially where I come from, because a lot of the people that I've turned to, like therapists and psychologists, it's been really hard to find people that get me, especially other queer, non-binary people who are struggling with their mental health and getting the help that they need. So mental health is very important in the LGBTQ community, and I have poems to share that talk about the struggle of that. So I hope you get something from them, and I hope you enjoy these poems. And yeah, I'll begin. This first poem is called A Latinx Queer is Allocated. A Latinx queer is allocated as grief. Pull the truth out. Pull the foreskin back. Pull up only when we reveal bodies and we say the names. Reveal the prize. The men menacing. I can safely say that no one completes me. No one has yet to completely understand a queerness with no gender, with no sense, with it and without it. Yet I slept tenderly in someone's arms. My beloved, I needed affection. I did not choose, but I love all the same. Is it my fault? Is it God's? Is it someone else's? I am not boy. I am not girl. I am not. One more time, I smile. I get fat. I queer. I like the stretch marks of my stomach, the red, the purple, swirling around a journey half known, half accepted, half wanted. And around here, I dream of Selena. I dream of the queens before me, the queens I still admire. I want to be worshipped like that. I swear to not leave you if you do, but all these memories bubble up and pop. It's another drunk call, another telling you to love me, another hate down my throat, a lonely walk home, another name, another day, another stuck to the roof of my mouth, soft spaces, caramelized, and they erased all the tenderness. But I deserve help. Do I deserve anything except men men menacing. I wake up and ask, why does this grief still remain intact? Remind me of you, of all the food I forced down to survive, of this mood I no longer recognize. I cannot withstand it, this pain in a box bouncing. I survive. Look at me. Nothing scathes or smears this painting. Thank you. This next poem is called Ricochet. It deals with a lot of, I guess, learning how to, I've throughout my life, I've been finding different therapists. I finally found a really good one. So just learning how to trust them and trust the work that we're doing, but also being anxious as an anxious person growing up with anxiety and learning and things bouncing back and forth and trying to find that balance with my mental health. So this is called Ricochet. I forget how to plunge, deep root, suck life out of prayer, out of tears along the river. I forget how to be a reviver when I feel like dying. I resurrect my memories out of the puddle, reimagine laughter in a dark room where my grandpa could walk, where I didn't cry, where I could reanimate the dreams, where my grandma didn't cry either every night. I forget what it means to be truthful. I forget what it means to be only a liar, as if I could connect, consume every pain that flourishes. I am home in my own dirty room. I forget I was deserted. I forget how to be mature. Sometimes serpentine, vice grip coiling through me. I'm allergic. I pursue what I want to destroy, hold tightly to its stagger. I keep coming for it and bounce back. This warm chemical moan. Sometimes it's like this. Sometimes this ache feels good and doesn't feel good, and that's okay. I've stayed, told myself that this ruin will become a relic, but I don't know how to heal just yet. I only know how to survive. Thank you. This last poem is called Grave Lord. I play a lot of video games. That's I always tell people like you find outlets for yourself when you're feeling sad or when you're feeling when you're feeling like you can't really feel good about the day. Find something that helps you, and so writing helps me, poetry, and playing video games. So I play a lot of video games in my spare time, and so this poem is based off of video games that I play, but also, reality and like fusing them together. So I hope you enjoy it. It's called Grave Lord. Grave Lord said, come the children that stir in the wombs of their mothers, like my mother stirring with me, haphazard and dangerous, a cautionary tale of love. The years that hold the haze of this picture, we don't know or can't remember how beautiful or awful or graceful those moments were. Only in our dreams do we seem to find a reason to care for or yell at each other, yell at the people who love us, yell at the people who despise us, the children to their parents, the friend to the friend, a different kind of fucked up. Like the moment someone dies, another is born, another to take the place of the living. It's also death, a cycle, another emperor, another queen, another king, another monarch resurrected from the past to be our future, to come and do something different than already was done. How could we know? How could we believe, expect to give up our expectations, put the crown on whoever holds the power to wield it on their head, come pretend, come compassionate and sympathetic into this mess we've all learned to live with in together? Lay all the rot at the feet and watch it heal. Come to the kingdom ready for the miracles that in the secrets left the dead to prepare us for the devastation of the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mateo, for sharing your work with us, sharing your heart and your sphere. We're gonna continue on sharing poetry. I just found out that the chat is disabled, so I know that y'all are putting all your hearts into celebrating the poems that you heard. We just can't see them, so we're gonna have to feel them. All right. So moving forward, we have Dr. Ryan J. Pettaway is a social epidemiologist, I practiced that one, and assistant professor in the OHSU PSU School of Public Health. His applied research integrates social epidemiology, critical theory, decolonizing methods, and CBPR/YPAR to examine notions of place, embodiment, and placemaking in community health. More broadly, his scholarship engages notions of epistemic, procedural, and distributive justice within public health knowledge production and applications of critical theory to examine dominant discourse and narrative frames of health equity. Dr. Pettaway is also an award-winning poet. His poem, Together, Untethered, was awarded an April 2020 National Poetry Month Prize and nominated for the 2021 Pushcart Prize. His poem, Latent, Missing, was published by Health Education and Behavior in August 2020, representing the first poem published within a major public health journal as an expression of public health science and scholarship. The piece was recently honored with their 2020 Lawrence W. Green Paper of the Year Award. And without further ado, please welcome and enjoy Dr. Ryan J. Pettaway.
Thanks for that, Joseph. I didn't realize y'all were going to read all of it. I was like, here's some material, take what you want. That was great though, I appreciate that. First, I'm just grateful to be here and hold this space with y'all. And I'm just excited that this is something that y'all created, co-created, that we can be a part of it. And it seems like it's going to be a continuation within public health. It makes me really excited because I think that opens up some possibilities for me to be the full expression of my scholarly, academic, and personal, just living my life self. I'm gonna share a few pieces. They're gonna be pretty explicitly public health. I think that part of it is because that's the space that I'm in right now, and part of it is my intention is to call in our field, and then when I have to, call them out. And so these pieces will be kind of in that vein. I'm gonna start with a piece that I wrote around this time last year. So April 27th, 2020, my great auntie, Delphine White, passed. And I wrote this piece shortly after that. As like a part of an ode, it's a part two. And for me, it was really about articulating the ways in which public health, for the most part, it turns us, people of color, those in the queer community, into statistics, into data. You think about public health and population health and health inequities research, and how much of that billion-dollar industry is built up of our bodies as specimens, but not necessarily our lives, and how we're not necessarily a part of the folks that are telling those stories. And so for me, it's a way to kind of honor that and reclaim it and reframe it for our field as a social epidemiologist. So I'll start with that piece. Relatives slash risk, or I am not your data, ode to Delphine's walk, part two. Part one. Epidemiology. Legions of credentialed humans without the cognitive capacity to comprehend the difference between being at risk and being risked. You wish to plot us, to scatter our bones between proximal and distal ends of a sphere, to partition our varied flesh. The way a rock might divide a stream, bringing forth alluvial futures, only to be siphoned off to water fields, flooded with illogics, dressed in a discourse of common sense, levied with citations, designed to engulf our communities with precarity. Armies of statistical engineers manufacturing measures of vulnerability to be paired with pink boa scarves and jet black stilettos. Oh yes, these models are worn. Like the soles of my great aunt's shoes, broken over stochastic terrains from Booth to Detroit to Portland, 10 decades and 3,100 miles of weathering narratives of risk, dangling from manuscript titles like the limbs of Black men Iola loved. And you think you know the curve of her arches because you raised and recorded her blood pressure. Use pedometers to count her steps, not knowing the reason she walks, born by a river that has yet to crest, and yet you know what's best for her. Swimming lessons. Part 2. You call us out our names, literally refer to us as your lowercase n's. Ignore centuries of resistance embodied and remembered in the melanin, the method of mothers with miles of grace in the folds of their fingers. You regress us. Reduce our resolve to residuals, misspecify our magic as marginal, confuse our truth with your facts. You can kiss this non-parametric ass over its full distribution. You know nothing of relative risk. I am a great nephew. I am a proud son. I am a blossom, the new fruit from a seed dropped long ago and rooted. I am not your data. I am a fist formed to forge futures where knuckles heal and hearts mend in the company of home. An alluvial gift springing forth from soil where my aunt's arches press rainwaters towards a sky stretched open by sounds of organs and bad hips, dancing and ceremony. I am not your data. I am your future. I am in communion with visionaries peering into reviews of our hues. We are the remakers, the remixed resampling, purpose on a re-up to reimagine and reclaim causal relationships, the effects re-estimated, the reminder, the re-articulation, the power from margins, connecting, correcting your errors because ours are correct. We love ourselves fully. So no, we do not flatten curves. We bend arcs. Thank you. All right. So another piece, also very explicit public health connection, really just a combination of thoughts, reflections I've had over my public health academic career as a writer, scholar, poet, reflecting on the atmosphere and tone at professional conferences where folks are talking about us without us, and really just talking about our bodies and our samples and all of our, it's just, you know, I have some feelings. So I'm gonna share this piece. First time I've actually read it, so we'll see how this goes. Yeah, it's called Note Found on a Cocktail Napkin at a Reception Following Keynote Address, Alicia Keys on Stereo, Unnamed Public Health Conference. So you can imagine stereo playing. You don't know my name. You don't know my, but I paid your ticket to Miami for that conference where you called my community disadvantaged and underserved. Apparently, we don't know shit, but enough for you to learn, repackage, misrepresent as new information, despite the fact that we've been knowing that shit since our mama's mamas. You talked about risk as if you know the odds of getting 104% on AP calculus exams after studying by candlelight when they cut the power on your single mom who sleeps on peeling couches and leaves you 50 cents to buy orange drink to wash down free lunches. Like you felt the sting of hot wax stains mistaken for grease from a poor kid's fingers. Homework ever jack your cortisol that high? It never comes down. I saw you under palm trees, 6 color-coded stickers hanging from your nameplate like a cartoon character's CV. Blue, presenter. Red, acronym number 1. Yellow, acronym number 2. Do the primary colors mean that you're basic? Green, exhibitor. Orange, acronym number 3. Purple, acronym number 4. Theory A, the coyote sucks at being a coyote yet remains in the script possessing an uncanny ability to survive. Theory B, the roadrunner simply can't afford a gym membership and entertains foolishness. You drank margaritas with tiny orange umbrellas and blue Curacao because you can't pronounce shit and colonizers always find a way to turn tequila into Europe. This is where you feel seen. You described how you use factor analysis to cut our stories into fragments small enough to smuggle on board the flash drive you plugged into that laptop with the data justice sticker. Yes, I know that wasn't your laptop. But did you know that we wasn't your data? Like my mother always told me, just because everyone else's I or B approves it doesn't mean you should. Your multivariate model is BEST. Characterized as a hybrid between a cartographer's pen and an imaginary toothpick. I hope you enjoyed your drink. P.S. Keep my data out your mouth. And I swear It feels like will you ever know? All right. I'm dreading watching this back on the replay. I don't even know what that was like. Thanks for bearing with me. All right. Last piece I'm going to read, a little less public health explicit. Really reflection on life, my life in general, our lives collectively in general, but especially the last year, the things we've been seeing, experiencing, and embodying. This piece is forthcoming in spring issue of Kite the magazine, should be out within the next month. This is called The Breathing Dark. This must be what it feels like to be sand, that darker portion where tides touch often. Enough so soccer balls roll smoothly safe where beak broken claws and hollowed half shells, flashing purple along the water's reach. A jeweled necklace strung below a shadowed collarbone, boundary space of distant debris, diadems, driftwood, and seagull shit upon would-be windows, wondering if this is cleansing or drowning with toddler toes leaping over rippled foam edges, landing unaware, their force pressing tiny bubbles from the breathing dark below. Do they know the difference between sand and glass? That something was buried last night, that it's us inside their lungs. That moons are not far enough to worship so long as lightning can burn and tides can erase them and their tiny footprints. Yes, this must be what it's like to be sand, smooth skeletons spent of power, power that produced the air that animates the joyful bodies upon us. Surely they feel us swelling beneath their wrinkled souls, swirling around their ankles as they gaze towards a horizon, waiting to swallow the source of our beauty, revealing the difference between appetite and hunger. Each day our sticky bones get rinsed from white tubs and no one ever wonders where we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, for allowing us to be a part of that work, and inviting us into that conversation. And I would love to, I need to remember that we're on Zoom. Every single time, my instinct is just be like, give a round of applause, like throw it up right now and get ready for this next person. But y'all can't do that. Do it in your homes, I guess. But at the very least, prepare yourselves on your own for the incredible Dr. LeConte Dill. Is a native of South Central Los Angeles and is currently creating a home place in Bedside, Brooklyn. Gang, gang, I will see you there. Oh my gosh. She is a community accountable scholar, educator, and poet. Dr. Dill holds degrees from Spelman College, the University of California, Los Angeles, and the University of California, Berkeley, guided by Black feminist epistemologies and using qualitative and arts-based research methods. She has a commitment towards transdisciplinary research. Dr. Dill listens to and shows up for urban Black girls and other youth of color and works to rigorously document their experiences of violence, safety, resistance, and wellness. Currently, she's a director of public health practice and a clinical associate professor at the New York University. Additionally, since 2015, she's been a research associate at the African Center for Migration and Society at Wits University in Johannesburg, South Africa. So without further ado, Dr. LeConte Dill, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for that warm introduction. Thank you also for the doctors Mendez. I've known Dara for a while, not to date us, but a couple of decades. And she's witnessed me over that time playing and integrating social sciences and public health and poetry. And so I thank her for seeing me and for inviting me to this space. I'm gonna go through what we call in public health from the upstream determinants of health to the downstream determinants and back again. I'm gonna introduce several names and stories of people. So if a name is not familiar, I'll try to provide some context in the poem or after, but also feel free to Google it and learn people's names and fuller stories. This first poem I actually wrote late last night. I'm part of a writing group. It's also National Poetry Month, in addition to being National Minority Health Month. And every April, my group, shout out to Elma's Heart Circle, if you're out there, or if not, I'll see you in the DMs tonight. We write a poem a day in April, and give each other feedback, give each other love, give each other affirmation, and most importantly, exercise that writing muscle. And I wrote this and I was like, this is perfect way to kick tonight off. 29, after Latasha, after Rodney, after Florence, after Normandy, after Watts, after Smoke, after me. 29 years ago, on the 29th day of a month with no days to give, we heaved, convulsive wailing. You know, when you start to cry, when you're angry and passionate and trying to make a convincing argument, that's Black people every day. To live and die in LA, a city built on a grid, always facing grid locks, always a corner away from a lockdown. Don't get caught slipping on the wrong corner store. Don't you dare drive your hoopty to the valley, a volley of bullets, a volley of baton swings, whip, lash, flash back, before trigger, before warnings. We make a fire ceremony. We release what is not serving us and what is damn sure not protecting us. This is our spring. Smoke makes more smog. And just the month before, old boy said that he didn't inhale. Mr. Tough on crime, they're always tough on Black folks. This one's for the Crips, for the Bloods, for the essays, for the peace treaty. 29 years ago, on the 29th day of a month with no days left to give, I was 14 and writing this poem. Thank you. This next one is a similar theme, but longer than yesterday, longer than 29 years ago, but same themes, same patterns. I learned of this woman, I learned of her story, not in a history book or not in a public health classroom, not even on a tour of New York, but I learned about her actually in a poetry classroom. I'll say her name in the poem, but Rose Butler was the last known person lynched in New York City in Washington Square Park. If you've come to New York or you've seen iconic images of New York, Washington Square Park is actually near my office at NYU, steps away. And she was a Black woman, a 19-year-old Black woman. So we need to add her name to hashtag say her name as we remember the erased people murdered by the state. A hanging in the city for Rose Butler. We all knew how to set ablaze a cigar or cut a rug at the hook or catch a crook staring down deep into your bosom. I fancied crooks. I was called a crook myself by master, by Mrs., by manumission, but I was born free, but I was born owing, but I was born ready to die. If you burn up in your sleep, will you still call me gal? Then who will call out for me when they string me up? Make a memory out of me up in that old elm tree. So for those of you, thank you. For those of you in New York or ever coming back to visit New York, I invite you to go to the North west corner of Washington Square Park. The elm tree is still there. There is no marker for Rose Butler, but I invite you to come to pay homage, to pour libation, to listen. The next story. So when we think about state-sanctioned violence, and particularly now, a lot more of us are thinking about it, but a lot of us actually have been thinking about it all our lives, have been experiencing it or witnessing it in public health. We're finally coming around to naming it as a crisis, but belatedly. But when we think of state-sanctioned violence, it's not only lethal violence ending in murder. It's important to also consider what folks call slow violence or slow death that still impacts those that are surveilled by the state and by vigilantes, and those that are, that quote unquote survive. And so this is for one such person. It starts with an epigraph, actually words from the woman who is alive and hopefully thriving. And it's actually, I'm using a poem called The Golden Shovel. It was created by poet Terrence Hayes in homage of the poet Gwendolyn Brooks. And typically in The Golden Shovel, it uses that quote at the beginning of the poem and uses each word from the quote as the end word of each line of the poem. So it's called Finding Out My Baby Took a Baby Doll from the Store. Quote unquote, I can't put my hands up. I have a fucking baby in my arms. I can't. I'm pregnant. Aisha Harper, 2019. We're always suspects. I see the police car and I can't stop my heart from racing, put my hands on my man's hands, wonder if our time is up, wonder if I taught my babies how to respond to the police, if I have to cut story time short tonight, cause a fucking pig threatens to shoot me in front of my baby. I lost track of where they took my man in all of the chaos. Plus, it's hot as hell and my head is pounding and I can't feel my arms and I got to protect my babies and I can't let them kill me. I intend to survive because I'm 5 months pregnant. So when we think of maternal health and maternal health crisis, we need to also think of these various systems of surveillance and trauma and myriad forms of violence that impact mothers and partners and babies and children and witnesses. And I think we're being reminded, or I know we're being reminded that on a daily basis. I promise I'm going to end on some hope, but I have a couple more of just reality. Speaking of maternal health, this poem is dedicated to a friend, to several of us, many of us on this Zoom or tuning in, and a colleague, Dr. Shalon Irving, who passed away in 2017. May she rest in power. May she find some peace. She was also a social epidemiologist. She a public health scholar, researcher, a friend, a fun friend and colleague, and a mother. And she passed away just 3 months after giving birth to her beautiful daughter, Solil. And she passed away because of the inadequacies of our American medical industrial complex. And so this is not enough, but this is a poem after her. Growing Scared. You for Shalon Irving. You always ready for a turn up. Don't let these degrees fool you. Always ready to start a family, plant a seed, birth a village, fling your son. We always dodge a stereotype. It always finds us anyway. Fuck a fibroid. What the blood clot? It's just stress. Black and women and single, and sing into your C-section scar, wide enough for your new baby girl smile. Cross your heart and hope to die? Nah, sis. Damn. So just a couple more. This is dedicated to that call in that Ryan talked about, that call in and call out that we find ourselves in, particularly in Zoom spaces, but also in workspaces. Nothing left to offer. All of these, I hope you're well emails just preface another ask, another take. The world is on fire and you're tone deaf, and I'm blinded by my ring light. I'm tired of reminding you that I'm not the other Black woman, but this Black woman. My fingers numb from texting the other Black woman about you, girl. My inbox needs a trigger warning. I'm warning you, I'm a puddle. Other mother students during and after your harm log off in time to suckle my own child. We lock eyes, make a pact, build a picket fence around all of our giving. And for the last offering, a glimmer of hope. Mommies and babies, sister girls and Miss Things. Always the pen, always close, always a poem, maybe a map, perhaps a letter for another day, always a Black girl prayer, always a song, always a rhythm, always in tune, always a yes, tired of maybes, always a rest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, so dearly. Like truly every single piece of those felt like an offering, felt like something sacred. And I know that so many people are going to treasure them in ways that is going to fill their spheres, but also what incredible seeds to plant in people's hearts, to plant for the work that we're doing, the worlds that we are building for the people that we care about, the people who need us, for ourselves who need us. This is so good. And yeah, it only gets better. It just keeps getting better and better and better. We have another incredible poet for you all today. Dr. Tamika Cage Conley is a graduate of the fiction program of the Iowa Writers Workshop, where she was awarded the Truman Capote Fellowship and the Provis Postgraduate Visiting Writer Fellowship in Fiction. Her work is published in Plowshares, the Virginia Quarterly Review, Callaloo, the African American Review, and elsewhere. She has received writing fellowships from the Iowa Writers Workshop, the Cave Canem Foundation, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, the Squaw Valley Community of Writers, and where did you not receive writing fellowships from? Okay, Squaw Valley Community of Writers and the Vermont Studio Center. The opera for which she wrote the libretto, Gathering of Suns, was awarded the Bronze Medal in Society and Social Issues category of the New York Festival's TV and Film Awards. She is at work on her first novel, You, Your Father, an epic family saga that considers the untimely deaths of African American men over 6 decades, beginning in the early 1940s in northern Louisiana. An excerpt of the novel is forthcoming in the spring 2021 edition of the Iowa Review. She is assistant professor of English and creative writing at Oxford College of Emory University. Dr. Tamika Cage Conley.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I really feel very honored and blessed to be with all of you tonight. The words have been really rousing and have really made me think in so many different ways and layers about the body, the self, and the soul, and how we are most often ill represented. And I want to thank Doctors Dar and Jason Mendez for the invitation. I'm going to read a bit from my novel in progress, You, Your Father. Probably what you most need to know is that this section focuses on the midwife to my protagonist. This part is leading up to his birth, and we are in December 1941, Christmas morning. The US has entered World War II, and the POV I'm in, Lucille Washington, has recently buried her son. Um, so I think that's just about as much as you need to know, and I'll just start reading. Thank you so much. Lucille did not think today is Christmas. The quiet in her home draped her like a body she once knew and woke her from a slumber she'd ached for since Ananias's funeral. Her bedroom was dark, save for dawn light that broke the shadows. George's body was curled beside hers, and her only dread was the chill once she threw off the blankets. The cold in the room made her eyes alert and bright. She wore yesterday's clothes. Her eyes moved slowly down her own length, the breast that had nursed, the stomach that had rounded for all of her children, the wound from where they had been pulled. She remembered the fire in her scalp last night for want of Ananias. The night before, she sat around the fireplace and read scripture with George as they watched the children play and poked the stockings that bore their names. The family sipped hot chocolate and held the mugs close to their lips, careful not to spill. When one of the children did or said something funny, George and Lucille looked up and over at them but did not smile. Their eyes returned to the pages of their Bibles like light. Still mourning, they were unsure of when to laugh again or if they wanted to. Though everyone in the house, including the children, knew Ananias's days had been dwindling like an unkempt fire since his birth, his loss made them wish and wonder. What if he had been born healthy? What if the doctor had not been a dog that treated Ananias like his life was nothing, his illness fatal and final, his own black burden? What if God had worked a miracle and touched Ananias's body, healing it from its ailments and weakness? His body was no longer anywhere Lucille could touch. His flesh was gone and his weak bones were in the ground. Now he was either an angel or a spirit, but he was no longer a boy. Had he ever been a boy? Her sons loved to run and sweat. They lifted heavy things and held up their fists to land blows into each other's cheeks and abdomens until she commanded them to stop. Sooner or later, their bodies would turn to hunger and they would want to hold a girl and kiss her, to smell her scent and tell her sweet things about her face and how she made them feel. Ananias's hands had never worked because his limbs had not. Lucille would have given everything for him to be born normal and free to express himself the way a child should, but there was nothing to give, not when God had decided. Her face turned to the ones she had left. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The three boys lay on their bellies with their eyes closed, waiting for their sister to touch them. Lucille heard the numbers over and over in her head like bad music. Her skull reverberated her own earthy sound and melody as she looked into the fire and counted the number of remaining children in her head. The chant was rhythmic and continuous and reminded her that there were 4 where previously there had been 5. She knew these 4 were healthy and strong, but the loss of one, even one as sick as Ananias, did nothing to ease her fear that she could lose more. She had not realized until this moment that she was afraid death might come for the rest of them. She could not bear to lose one more, not one more. As she read the scripture, no man can serve 2 masters, For either he will hate the one and love the other, she decided she would not unravel. But the embers were beneath her scalp now, each hair follicle alive with dots of flame. Ooh, my goodness, she said, her fingertips in her hair as she scratched rapidly, fitfully. What's the matter? George asked, confused, mesmerized by the sight of his wife as she moved her large fingertips along her scalp with speed and force. My head. What about it? Feel like it's burning. What? I said it feel hot, George. Lord have mercy. George whispered so the children would not hear, but the boys had already run into the back of the house. Nancy had been watching Lucille all night because it seemed that though her mother was right there in front of her, she was also far away. George looked down at the top of his daughter's head when Nancy pushed him out of the way. Get her some water, Daddy. What? George asked. She says she hot. Get her some water. George ran into the kitchen. Dad'll be right back, Mama. Maybe think about something cold until he comes, Nancy said as she put her hand on her mother's shoulder. Lucille shook her head and felt confident over Nancy's words as she realized her girl was there by her side and not her boys, which was not a surprise. Yet she had no idea what she would do with the water once George brought it. Pour it on her head, drink it, and let the cool work its way to her scalp that felt lit with tiny sparks. George brought the water. He lifted her hand, opened her palm, and placed the glass there like Lucille was a toddler learning to use her hands. Lucille held the water, looked into it, and remembered Ananias was never baptized. Water had not touched his body to make him righteous or show his commitment to a life of faith and sacrifice. Getting him to the baptismal pool at the church was too hard, and how could such a child ever sin or even come close? The state of his mind and body made him innocent, and everyone knew he would have to be bound for heaven. After a life born into suffering, what else could there be after he died? I don't know what to do with this, Lucille said. After a pause, she dipped her finger into the glass, then blotted the liquid onto her lips. George watched her. Her eyes were the same round moons they had always been, capable and wise. He saw the dark fullness of her mouth and remembered all the wild ways they had loved when they were young and when they had made their children, the tenderness that had covered their frames when they reached for each other. But George saw how Lucille suffered. This was Lucy, he thought, and Lucy was his. Her scalp was his trouble, and so were her hands and tongue. The fit in her mind now was his too. Her finger in the glass that touched her lips and slicked them with cool water was his finger. George's hand on the back of Lucille's neck felt like a damp towel. The weight of his hand and each touch of her finger of her mouth brought mercy and slow relief. The embers on her scalp died down, but the anger that had come in fire on her head did not leave. Nancy, you did good taking care of me. Go on now, go to bed. I'll be all right, said Lucille. I don't want to go, Nancy replied. Do like your mama say, Nancy, George said as he patted the top of his daughter's head. Give me a hug, Lucille said. Nancy wrapped her thin arms around her mother's neck and kissed her on the cheek, then ran to her room. Sure that her daughter was no longer in earshot, Lucille spoke to her husband. I want him back. Who back? Ananias. Lord have mercy. He didn't need to die, Lucille said. We knew it was coming, Lucy. He was sick. He was more than sick. He was sick, George. Sick don't have to mean dead, do it? It was God's will. We can't argue. I ain't arguing, George. I'm saying he could have stayed alive like he was. He could have stayed right here in this house and never left. That ain't no life. Not for a young man, Lucy, not for nobody. Any life is better than death, she said. Not for Ananias. He ain't coming back. No, Lucy, he ain't. Lucille looked into the fire. She remembered the time when fire was shut up in her bones and she could feel chariots turning and moving in her blood. Her hands would fly up and wave back and forth, to give glory on high, and she would speak in other tongues. That woman was far away. She could not find or taste her and did not want to. What she wanted was buried, and her worship was gone with him. Pray for me, George, she said. I think I stopped there. Thank you.
Thank you so dearly for that. I want us to, even before we move forward into the rest of this, to take a moment and just sit with that. Take a moment to breathe. As people have, we have received so much this evening, may we actually receive it. May we hold it close to ourselves. May it be something that that holds us beyond this moment, beyond this beautiful, beautiful hour, and into the hours we have to come.